you're brought here to talk to you guys about funding, which of course any filmmaker has to be an expert in, because it's really a major part of your job as a filmmaker is to come up with the funds to actually get that film out there. And obviously changing landscapes, which I'm sure you guys have heard about a lot today, dictates that you really need to be an expert, and that changes all the time.
Most advice that you get, the opposite may well be true. And I took, for example, look before you leap, makes a lot of sense when it comes to making documentaries. Go out, do your homework, see, what place there is in the marketplace for the subject you're doing, and learn about budgets and learn about, all this stuff. But on the other hand, if you know too much about all that goes into making a documentary, if you knew how much time it would take, how many years of your life, how much money, how much effort it takes, you would never make a documentary. So the opposite advice of leap before you look is equally good advice, I think, when it comes to making documentaries.
And Shola's advice is really, you can have it all, you just can't have it at the same time, which is very true.
I couldn't imagine choosing just one at all. And I'm happy, so I guess my piece is really about the juggling act of figuring out what makes you happy, and that really you can only have one ball really up in the air that you're focusing on, like jugglers. You're looking at the one, and you manage the other two. But so, in other words, you can't be trying to have a baby and also be in production in the field. Like they're technically, it's not
awkward. Twins.
Or maybe,
it's basically twins. Right?
By the way, was it Frederick Wiseman who gave the advice of marry someone rich?
Yeah.
That was his whole thing.
That was the best advice, actually.
It was the best advice in the book, for sure.
Advice.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, for the creative, I feel like there's sort of two different hats. On one hand, you want to be very nurturing of your ideas and be wide open, and then you have to sort of be incredibly cruel and ruthless about your work and kill whatever's not good. And it's hard to do both of those things. I feel like sometimes you have to, be a business person, sometimes you have to be a dreamy artist, and sometimes you have to be tough, and sometimes you have to be soft, and all the way down to editing questions. I mean, when we're in the edit room, we say, is this complex or is this confusing? And you want your work to be complex, but you don't want it to be confusing. And how do you there's no sort of solid rule for any of these things. It's just sort of, are you too close to one or are you too close to the other?
Sometimes I look back on all these difficult moments, and you think at the time they're really difficult, but they end up being pivotal. You just have to think about them in another way, and then it's this opportunity that you never would have had.
I think the worst mistake beginner filmmakers make is that you only raise enough to get through a cut, expecting to raise money from your rough cut. And then you lose the editor because they can't wait around for you to raise the money. And so you've paid an editor to watch weeks and months of footage, only to then lose them and have to hire someone else down the line. So I think it's really, for me, very important to raise most, if not all, of the budget before I begin editing. So, I'll work really hard to get a really, really good work sample, because in my experience, and I work mostly with broadcast money, with getting, in my case, for the last 4 films, HBO has been the first broadcaster in, but never for more than half the budget. So it's just, no matter how many times I work with them, they have to see the footage. They have to see the goods. It's almost like you're reinventing the wheel every time.
But to answer the question of the models now, I'd say those are the kind of different models. The independent, let's make a trailer and then see who's game. And then there are places you can bring those trailers. With Bobby Fischer, for instance, the Forum in Amsterdam is a place you can kind of go and try to pull together various
hot docs too. Hot docs
too, and Good Pitch. There's a bunch of places where if you have a trailer, some of those places require that you have some financing or some commitment. So you might need commitment from a European broadcaster or a an international sales body. So you might need some commitment. Everyone is a little different. And that's also a way to put together financing for a film, especially if it has international appeal and it's not just an American project.
I'd saved up some money, so I sort of thought, well, I could go to film school or I could just make a movie. And so I took a leave of absence from the company and just started shooting it, and I shot it. And then I cut a trailer, and I started taking the trailer around to people, and nobody would give me money. At that point, I also showed it to Liz, who jumped on as a executive producer, which was very helpful. But nobody wanted to give money to a guy that's never made a movie. There's a big difference between making a trailer and making a movie, and they knew that. And in retrospect,
It's a really good trailer.
And so I just did the same thing. I went back to the internet company. I did one more job, got my Cobra, recharged, and then left again, and got a Mac and Final Cut Pro and the manual, and just learned how to edit over the next 2 years, just sitting in my apartment. And then I had a cut of the movie, and when I had maybe 100-minute cut, that's when POV and ITVS came on, and then I suddenly had money, and so I could bring in another editor who did a lot of work tightening it, and we could pay music and all those things. But it's like Liz said, everyone seems different, and some of them are harder to explain, some of them are high concept, and the more high concept it is, the more likely you're going to be to get money up front, and the more it's about execution, the more somebody's going to play wait and see with you and say, well, maybe it'll be great or maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, I can edit. I'd prefer not to. And also, if it's an autobiographical story, I feel like I need someone who's, a little more objective to help out. But I love collaborating with editors. And I think it's, to me, it's the part of the process I enjoy the most, working with a great editor who brings, a real story, vision of the story and story structure to it. And, I'm in awe of, particularly people who make personal documentaries who edit themselves, like Alan Berliner and Ross McElwee and people like that. It's, it's very tricky to be so objective about you and the role you play in a film and your story arc. And your hero's journey.
Oh, the question was about opening up your work to other people and soliciting comments and then how to process it. And I do a ton of that. I'm irritating to my friends because I'll ask them to sit through something and tell me what they like and don't like. In my office, there are a number of filmmakers that are up and down the hall, and we're constantly saying, "We just watch this. Is this funny or is this stupid?" And just 2 minutes, just 2 minutes. To me, the two main things that I take away from a test screening are, one, if somebody says something that I kind of already knew, and a lot of times you sort of edit something and you think you're being tricky and that you found this good way of fudging some I don't know what, making something funny that's not really funny, and then you hear it and you instantly know, yeah, of course, no, that can't be in there, can't be in there. And the second thing is if you hear something from a lot of people, even if you don't think it. And somebody said to me once, if 3 people tell you you're drunk, sit down, and even if you think that you're not. And so those are sort of the two things: is either yes, this rings true to me, or this doesn't ring true, but I'm hearing it over and over. So there's something here that I'm not seeing.
I'd like to comment on that. You also asked when is the right time to start doing that. First of all, I'm a little bit in the opposite direction of Marshall. I don't like to share my films with a lot of people. I find that I get you ask 10 people and you get 10 different opinions, and I don't find it extremely helpful to go wide. I will have a very, very small group of people who I kind of always go back to and sort of show my films, and that includes usually the producers of the film as well, who I'll get a lot of great feedback from. Your question is, when do you show it? And I have pretty strong opinions about that. I think you don't show it until you think it's really great and you don't know what you're supposed to do next, because I think it's damaging, especially for young, emerging filmmakers, to show stuff that's not really ready, because you won't often get a second audience. As a filmmaker, I'll often, I'll have conversations with subjects where I'll say, well, okay, would you mind going over to your grandmother's house so we can talk about blah, 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 and suggest certain things that then become scenes. So that is affecting the subject and the story in that way. And and what is the line of, between that and, observation? To me, the only thing I can use is my own judgment and what feels true to that character and something they would be doing at some point. And I can only use my own best judgment about what's true and honest for that character.
I always felt like the biggest part of my job was just simply making people feel comfortable when that big a camera is pointing at them or is, in the room with them, and making it feel like it's no big deal, and creating about as relaxed an atmosphere as you possibly can, which means, just being really, joking around a lot and making them feel comfortable to be themselves.
Kickstarter has certainly gone directly, but I don't feel like Kickstarter's only for making money. I mean, Kickstarter's, as if you sat in the panel before, it's about building a community. And having used Kickstarter for the book, I can say that, yes, it was wonderful to get the printing paid for, because I don't have a credit card that money's sitting on now. But I also wouldn't probably have made the project if we didn't have the people who wanted to see the project.
It's not for everybody. I mean, I personally don't feel comfortable going to my personal network trying to raise money. It just is not going to net what I'm looking for. I'm much more comfortable writing a grant and getting rejected, or going to a meeting and having a pitch. So I think that part of this process is evaluating what are your strengths as a filmmaker and working to fill the weaknesses. Play to your strengths. I'm not a shooter, so I'm not shooting for the trailer tape, because that's not going to get me my film made. And so you just evaluate yourself and try and be honest, and then you will find ways to be successful.